Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our Glassdoor webinar today. I'm Katie Williams, and I'm the marketing manager here at Glassdoor. And just before we start, I want to go through a few housekeeping items. So we love questions, so we're going to take them all at the end, but all lines are muted. So if you do have any questions, just please type them in the questions chat box, and we'll get to them at the end. And this webinar will also be recorded, so you can have the pleasure of watching it later, and we'll send that out in an email after the webinar. It's my great pleasure today to introduce our presenters, Dina Kraus. She's the Talent Lead for Strategic Initiatives Talent Acquisition at Cigna, and Kelly McGuire Payne. She's the Director of Client Success here at Glassdoor. So with that, I just want to welcome everyone to Recruitment Marketing 101, how to leverage social tools to promote your brand. Here are our speakers. I'm going to move to the next slide here, if it works. There we go. So we have Dina and Kelly, and Dina's actually going to take it away. So Dina, take it away for us.
Great. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for allowing me to be here with you today. So as Kate mentioned, my name is Dina Kraus, and I am a talent lead for our Strategic Initiatives group at Cigna. I report to Cynthia Ryan, who is the Global Head of Talent Acquisition, Leadership Development, and Employee Relations at Cigna, and have been with the organization for about 15 years in many capacities, but always in a talent acquisition space. So really have watched the organization evolve and change over many years, going from a domestic company from a focus perspective to a company in 26 countries. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the organizational structure, our mission and vision, and how we have really aligned our social media strategy to try to support that, if you will, in just a few moments. But I'm thrilled to be here today, so thank you. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief overview of our agenda, and we'll talk a little bit about, what it looks like to think like a marketer. So what are job seekers looking for today? How to be innovative, consultative, and strategic all at the same time. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about employer brand, not a whole lot of time talking about that today, but employer brand and understanding our employer brand or your employer brand is obviously very important as you think about developing, that social strategy, social networking, social recruiting, social, social media strategy, if you will. And then embracing transparency. So how do we, communicate both internally and externally while creating those clear objectives? And then how do we obviously utilize our employees? So again, we have some successes in terms of how we utilize our own employees across the globe to be those talent ambassadors for the organization. And then I'll talk briefly as well about some of the partnerships that we've established over the course of the last 2 years in more detail with some very specific examples. So if you want to turn to the next slide, that would be fantastic, Katie, thank you. But I think in starting, what I would like to say is this is not a perfect presentation. We're on a journey, as I'm sure many of you are, as you think about where the company's been, where it's going, the strategic priorities. Ours as an organization, shift. Our mission and vision remain the same, but a lot of impacts, as you can imagine, to the healthcare industry that we have to account for. So in terms of how we brand ourselves in the marketplace, every candidate that we talk to has either been a Cigna customer, maybe a Cigna customer, or is a Cigna customer today. So for us, it's really important to understand, what has your experience been with Cigna, perhaps not as a candidate, but as a consumer and or that of their family member. So always really thinking like a marketer, right? So there are so many candidates out there looking for jobs. A lot of us are looking for great talent on a daily basis. And how do we stand out, right? So times are changing, as I've mentioned, and how do we respond to candidates today? So, mobile technology is so very important. Access to quick information. They want everything quick and fast. They don't want to spend 30 minutes completing an application. They want to be able to do it in 3 minutes using their LinkedIn profile. We're in a position today when we think about marketing ourselves where, we're dealing with a global workforce, which is new for us, right? So we have opportunities and businesses and joint ventures in 26 countries, which many folks don't realize, having been the organization having been founded here in the States, but a whole new set of challenges for us in terms of how do we articulate our message, how do we brand ourselves in different markets across the globe in terms that will, resonate with candidates and with the consumer. How do we tie it all back to our mission statement? How do we leverage global talent pools and develop those global talent pools to meet the future needs of the organization? What is our social media strategy, and how does it align to Cigna's greater social media and brand and digital marketing strategy? So we've spent literally, I'd say, the last 2 years really trying to understand, where do we want to go? How do we want to message? Is that resonating? So through surveys, through focus groups, outreaching to our customers in various regional markets, and really taking all of that information. We've also moved away from a lot more of print and a lot more visual in terms of the way that we are communicating with both our consumers as well as with our candidates, and I'll show you a couple examples of that today. Next slide, please. As we think about the changing needs, right, in different demographics and segmentation, we'll talk a little bit about millennials, but I think this is an important group. We have a very robust, what we call millennial or early career hiring strategy at Cigna. Very, very important to the future of the organization globally, specifically as we look at retirements that are pending, and the changing skill sets of the organization, right? So spending a lot of time looking and working very closely with global institutions, and also ensuring that we have very clear and productive and impactful programs for early career hires that are joining the organization. So early career hires for us could pertain to one that is just graduating, perhaps an intern, or one that has been in the market. Maybe they graduated 3 years ago and they've gone back to school, and they're now pursuing maybe a different kind of opportunity. But again, from a communications perspective, this is a great example because the way we communicate with millennials is a little bit different. As I mentioned, they want the information quickly, they want instant feedback. They can research anything at any time, and they're going to. So they're going to go to a site like Glassdoor, and they're going to look at the information. They're going to look at all of the different interview assessments and also the reviews, good, bad, to make that adjustment, to make that assessment, right? Is this the place for me? Is this the right culture for me based on what I'm reading here? So they're looking for that kind of information. And a lot of information is at their fingertips, but what we're also hearing even from our own internal employees is, specific to transparency. They want information. They want the communication. They want it often, and they want to be able to get to the information when they want it. Next slide, please. Here we go. Before I talk a little bit about Cigna, and I'm going to give a brief history on the organization, because I do think it's important to understand, who we are as a company in order to understand why we've chosen the path we've chosen, and why we've had some of the success, that we've had. And again, it is a journey, but we're in the process right now of actually evaluating our employee value proposition. As I mentioned, we have operations in 26 countries. However, this year we are moving through full integration of our HR functionality. So as you can imagine, it's a huge adjustment, specifically for our peers in countries where they just don't have the technology. So in addition to providing them with tools and resources and leveraging social media consistently across the globe, we're also implementing Taleo and moving away from PeopleSoft. So a lot of change happening all at one time. But a lot of conversation around, what is Cigna's employee value proposition? What is our employer brand? Does it reflect our brand promise, right? Does it give us that competitive advantage across the globe? So I think that's going to be a constant evolution as well. And really, as I mentioned earlier, taking the time to understand what our customers want and need, because these customers are potential, or these candidates are potential customers for us. So it's really important that there's that direct tie-in. Additionally, we have not done anything as it relates to our social media strategy without the partnership and collaboration and consent to some degree of our digital marketing and brand team. as many organizations are moving in this direction, right? So recruitment marketing and the marketing and brand strategy for the corporation, for the company, really needs to be lockstep. So before we do anything, before we engage new partners, before we engage with new campaigns, we're constantly talking to them about what we'd like to do and what we're hearing, but what are you hearing and how is the brand strategy changing? I'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn, but even our presence on LinkedIn and Glassdoor and Facebook, we'll be looking to enhance our presence from a global perspective. So it's going to be really important that as we're looking at messaging to in the various regions where we have operations, that again, we're staying very, very connected to what the greater organization is doing as well. And then lastly, what I would say about employee brand is understanding what our employees have to say, right? So it could be our current employees, or Glassdoor has been very helpful to us in terms of understanding not just what our existing employees are saying, but also what candidates are saying. So what is their perception of the organization? What was their experience with Cigna? Was it what they thought? What was the culture like? Did they leave feeling like, even though I didn't get the job today, wow, this was a great experience and I hope they consider me for an opportunity in the future? And then, lastly, how do we leverage those individuals in their own networks to, generate more interest and referrals for the organization as well? So it's a very, has to be a very buttoned up process. Next slide, please. So I talked briefly about transparency. And if you move to the next slide, this is actually kind of an overview of Cigna's mission here to help the people we serve improve their health, well-being, and sense of security. But if you move to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about, transparency, if you will, and how we've chosen to embrace transparency. And this slide always makes me laugh because when we first talked about Glassdoor as an organization, there was some hesitation in terms of, wow, oh my goodness, we're asking people for feedback, and what if the feedback isn't great? What if we see something that we don't necessarily want to see, or feedback that may not necessarily be as positive as we would have hoped for? But I think we've really chosen to be brave, right? To have courage. It's actually one of our competencies. We have 15 enterprise competencies that we leverage across the globe, and courage is one of those. So really having the courage to take that feedback and to improve. And it's really been a very interesting experience, right? So if we want to reach out to job seekers and employees, and we want to embrace, that transparency, this is basically how we have chosen to do it as well. So it's not just with Glassdoor, but you're seeing it with Facebook, you're seeing it with LinkedIn, you're seeing it with blog capability as well. So, again, being brave, not being afraid to take that feedback, and now we're in a position where, particularly our partnership with Glassdoor, we have the opportunity to respond, not just to the posts that may not be favorable, but also to those that are very, very positive. Additionally, we've kind of taken it a step farther, and we've said, okay, this is really interesting feedback. Now, how does this tie back to some turnover that we're seeing in maybe particular functional areas or geographical locations? How does that tie back as well to what we're seeing as it relates to data that we've collected from new hires as part of our onboarding process and their own experience? And so through this information gathering process, we've been able to build the story. So now we're starting to really understand where the greater areas of opportunity are. And then lastly, we're able to share that with our COE partner. So Cigna has a center of expertise methodology in terms of the centers of expertise support the HR business partner that supports the business. Those centers of expertise would be talent acquisition, leadership development, corporate compensation, employee relations as an example. So being able to take some of this feedback to say, hey, here's what we're seeing in terms of comp information, here's what we're seeing in terms of feedback around the culture, or here's what we're seeing based on the folks that have interviewed for this particular program. I think we have some areas of opportunity around communication and manager engagement as an example. So we've tried to take it one step farther, not just looking at the comments, but how are we actually acting on those comments and making sure that align with our mission that every customer is delighted 100% of the time. Again, whether they choose to accept an offer with Cigna or not, they're leaving with a really good feeling and a really good impression of the organization. And that's just so important. Next slide, please, Katie. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, about some of the resources that could potentially help you, based on our own experience in establishing that social media strategy, or what some folks call social networking, and how to maybe establish that more transparent approach. So Katie, if you'll turn to the next slide. Oh. There we go. I want to talk a little bit about starting with our employees. And one of the things that we've done that's been very successful is we've launched many years ago Cigna's what we call our employee referral program. We actually recently changed the name as we moved through global integration to ensure that it resonates across the globe. Many of the different regions have their own employee referral programs, but regardless, it's still Cigna's #1 source of hire. Which is pretty amazing. Over 50% of our external hires come from our employee referral program, and we're very, very proud of that. We will continue to look to expand that in regions that don't have an employee referral program, and there's a lot that we're working toward this year as we move to full global integration, but it's really leveraging our own employees in their networks to become those talent ambassadors for the organization. It's simply branding that you cannot buy. It's so important. It's how we obtain feedback. It's how we understand our presence in the marketplace. For us, every time a hire is made, we send them an invitation. We want them part of our network, and we want their networks to understand the opportunities that are available to them, or perhaps educate them, on the organization, maybe as a candidate, maybe as a consumer as well. So how do we get those folks on board? Secondly, it's also leveraging internal programs. So it's not just all externally focused, right? So there are opportunities to leverage social networking capabilities internally through many different platforms. We have something that we leverage called My Sites that's been very successful. And it allows us to network internally with many different functional areas. So we, as an organization, have a very robust talent scorecard that feeds up to Cigna's HR scorecard as an enterprise. We promote very heavily cross-functional movement. We do that to allow our employees to gain the experience and exposure to other areas that they may not normally have, kind of round out that level of expertise. And so it really allows us through social networking to outreach to those folks, to talk to them and understand their career interests and capabilities. And as a result of that, it allows us to tap into those networks that they may also have externally as we're looking to, bring great talent to the organization in any number of functional areas, from clinical to informatics to actuarial to, operations to frontline managers and to general managers, right? Because we're always looking for great talent at that more senior level, that folks that are more globally mobile and that can take on additional opportunities or responsibilities as the business needs continue to shift. So that's something that's going to be very important to us as well. Next slide. And then arming folks with the right tools. So one of the things that we have spent a lot of time doing, I'd say in the last 16 to 18 months, is education. So what does it mean? When we talk about a partnership with Glassdoor, we talk about a partnership with Facebook or LinkedIn, it's not just posting a job, right? It's much more than that. So having them understand, it's important that they understand how these tools work, first of all. So for our own HR and talent organization, we spend a lot of time on constant education, webinars, resources, refreshers, what's the latest technology, how can they leverage that in what they're doing on a daily basis, but how can they also leverage their own networks, right, so that we can continue to grow our presence and understanding as what we call a premier employer across the globe. So again, making sure that we arm individuals, our own employees, both inside and outside the organization, and then understanding what our own employees are saying, right? So is it consistent with our mission and vision as an organization? That's very, very important to understand. And then what are candidates saying before and after interviews, and what do we learn from that? So again, leveraging the feedback that we've received from Glassdoor, we actually run a report We can run a report in the last 30 days for every single comment that we've received, pros and cons. We can analyze that information, which we have. We can look for specific trends, which we have. So again, really using that from an educational perspective. But again, taking the time to respond, taking time to let them know and to thank them for the feedback that they have provided, and to encourage them to continue to consider Cigna, again, as a consumer and as a candidate as well. So moving forward, if we could move to the next slide, one of the things that I'd like to talk a little bit more about today is how we did it at Cigna. So Katie, if you'll move forward, that would be great. Oh, if you can move forward, that'd be great. Yeah, just keep going. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. And if you'll move to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about Cigna. And who we are as an organization, again, kind of to set the stage, and then we'll talk about some of the successes that we've seen recently. But for those of you that are not familiar, or maybe some of you are even Cigna customers today, we have about 35,000 employees across the globe. We have about 75 million global customer partnerships or relationships. We also have operations in 26 countries, but we have sales in more than 30 countries. So very large organization. You know, I can say that having been with Cigna for 15 years, we've been through a lot of change. It's been very exciting. A lot of folks ask me, wow, you've been in talent acquisition a long time, but I always remind them I've probably had every different position. I've managed every recruiting team. Every day something new and different, you know, and it's very, very exciting. But at the same time, what keeps me here is the mission and vision of the organization. That's never wavered, not for a minute. As an organization, you know, we do consider ourselves a leader dedicated to helping people around the world. And it's not just our members, it also extends well beyond the member to the family, which is very important. So if you don't know this, even as a member, right, a consumer of Cigna's, if you have family members that live with you that may not, you know, have Cigna as their insurer, as an example, they still are eligible to participate in all of our healthcare programs, many of our incentive programs, our employee assistance programs as well. So we really try to think beyond just what we're seeing here today, and offering services that are very much focused on health and wellness. And we truly consider ourselves a health and wellness company, not an insurance company. So really a shift in terms of what we do and how we use, you know, analytics to drive decisions and better products and services. And then obviously, for those of you that follow healthcare reform, a lot happening in the healthcare space. You know, moving away from just focus on the employer, but also how do we focus more on the individual. So again, it's been a learning opportunity and a journey, certainly for all of us. And I think Cigna really continues to innovate and expand and grow globally, right? So we have remained financially strong. We've branched out across the world, and I think we'll continue to see that. Some of our key products include healthcare, as you know, group disability, life insurance, accident insurance, and also international insurance coverage, so for expatriate benefits, as an example. Next slide. Yeah, so one of the things that, as an organization, this is David Cordani, our CEO, there are two things that we typically like to talk about when we talk about Cigna. The first is our people, obviously, people, number one. But number two is the technology, and I really feel like that kind of ties into what we're talking about here today, because frankly, our customers look to us for our expertise and services, but also tools that they can leverage, right? So getting to that information, using a mobile app as an example, soliciting feedback in different ways, blogging, gamification. I mean, these are all things that we're doing to engage our consumer differently in a way that we've never done before. So again, as it relates to social media strategy and some of the partnerships like Glassdoor and Facebook and others that we have, it's really kind of mirroring those efforts as well. So how do we leverage technology differently? How do we engage differently? How do we tell the story differently? And conversely, what's the story that they have to tell us, right? So are we really listening to what they're saying? You know, and I guess the unique needs that all of us have. Next slide, please. So So as I said, this slide talks a little bit about, our focus. As I mentioned, our mission is to help the people we serve improve their health, well-being, and sense of security. And as an organization, there are many different resources and expertise that we deliver across the globe. There are a number of key areas where we're very, very focused. One is on children's wellness. The other is on senior care. As many of you may know, Cigna acquired a company called HealthSpring based out of Nashville, Tennessee about a year and a half ago. And it's focused on the seniors market, puts it to the Medicare Advantage space in all 50 states. And I think we'll continue to see more acquisition activity there. Women's health. Very, very important. We're moving into Women's Health Week, which is May 12th, so we'll be doing a grant campaign both internally and externally to talk a little bit about resources that are available and education across the globe. And then obviously health equity. So how do we remove barriers to help all people pursue optimal health and personal achievement? And many of the organizations that we work with that actually do that would include like the March of Dimes or the veterans groups that we work with. We also support the Walt Disney World Marathon Weekend and many other organizations across the globe as it relates to health and wellness initiatives. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we talk a little bit about our diverse global investments of time, right? But it's talent and technology, and they come in many different forms. We handle over 100,000 calls a day from our members. We're also the only healthcare provider that is 24/7. So from a best-in-class perspective, we've really strived, again, to listen and to understand and to engage our members differently. We use social media very aggressively in how we interact with our customers on a daily basis. So if you had a question, you can send us an email. We have blogs. We have all kinds of different ways. We have escalated avenues by which you can submit a request, not necessarily over the phone, but in other means, and we'll actually respond. They're constantly trolling our social media sites. They're responding to questions almost as quick as they're being submitted. If there are concerns, issues, anything of that nature. So we've really taken a very aggressive approach, again, boiling down to how do we communicate with our customer and making sure that we're being very, very proactive, and secondly, very, very transparent. So no question is a bad question, and we just want to make sure that we're always thinking more aggressively about our approach. And then here it talks a little bit about the attributes. So I mentioned that as an organization, Cigna leverages 15 core competencies by which we assess our talent, by which we develop our people. Aligned to those competencies are Cigna's guiding principles, and then the attributes. So making sure that everything we do every day is easy and reliable in ways that you can find proactive, personal, and empathetic. So every decision we make is based on the 5 attributes of the guiding principles. Always going back to how are we delighting the customer? How are we delighting the candidate? What is their experience? What is their level of satisfaction? Has their experience changed since that last interaction with the organization? And then what is our referenceability factor in the marketplace? So we do look at NPS, or Net Promoter Score. However, we do not benchmark ourselves against what you would consider to be our true competitors, United and Aetna, as an example. In fact, we benchmark ourselves against what we consider to be best-in-class, customer-centric organizations in the marketplace today. Those companies might include, and do include rather, companies like Zappos, Southwest Airlines, Ritz-Carlton. Those are 3 that come to mind. Amazon, and many others. So again, those customers that understand how to truly delight the customer. I think if you talk to anyone that shops at Zappos, they probably have great things to say. You can return anything to them without explanation. Fantastic customer service. So for us, it's how do we empower our own employees, right, to be and to delight the customer at every turn. And the same is true for our talent management strategy. So when we're talking about candidates, it's how do we, delight them in every turn? How do we engage their level of interest? How do we keep them interested? And conversely, once they get here, how do we retain great talent to the organization? So, always looking at how we can improve, leveraging technology internally and externally in order to do that. couple things about what matters most, and I've already referenced some of the products and services that we offer, across the globe. For those of you that might be interested in our global presence, which we'll talk about some of the social media partnerships that we have, but we have entered several new developing international markets that are very much poised for growth. So Signet and its joint venture partners are located in India. We're also looking at other opportunities across the Middle East. Additionally, in Turkey, we launched a joint venture partnership with a retail bank. We also have a joint venture partnership in China. And we also acquired a company by the name of Van Breda in Belgium, which is the largest provider of expatriate benefits in the world. So again, just a lot of competing, priorities, pressures. We focus, again, consistently on what we consider 3 critical priorities as we continue to drive the organization forward. Always maintaining that focus to customer centricity in terms of putting the customer front and center in everything we do, embracing and adapting to change. I think that's one of the more important factors in terms of, what we've been faced with over the last couple of years, and it's accelerating from a change perspective. And then understanding and leveraging insights. So being able to use those insights to drive our business on a go-forward basis, and I think that's also very, very important. So as I mentioned earlier, as it relates to our own social media strategy, we just didn't initiate these partnerships. We actually initiated them with the intent of understanding what is the return on investment, how does it impact our brand in the marketplace. We actually measure every hire, so we understand source of hire for every hire coming in, that we bring to the organization. We can actually report back on that. So on the quarterly scorecard that's released, we do report out on source of hire. With the release of Taleo, of course, across the globe, we'll have a better understanding of what that looks like in many different regional markets as well. But it's being able to track and understand those partnerships so that we can constantly improve our presence by leveraging the feedback, by sharing that with our peers, by ensuring that they're also leveraging the tools and resources that we have provided to them. So that's something that we track and measure very aggressively as well. And we're constantly looking. So, what's the new technology? What else is out there? Are there things that we haven't thought of? What's the greater organization doing? Can we tap into that? Just again, constantly trying to be as innovative as possible. Next slide, Katie. Thank you. So I'm going to just talk really briefly about this particular slide, but I wanted to, as we talk about how we've kind of evolved, this is how we've evolved. Very, very different landscape than where we started back in 1792 as an organization, moving from a U.S. insurance carrier, as I mentioned earlier, to that global organization. So again, how do we keep up with that change? We are branded differently in many different regional markets. So for us, it's not a one-stop shop. It's understanding how we are branded in the UK, as an example, versus how we're branded in Hong Kong versus how we're branded in China. So as you can see here, ViLife and ChoiceLinks and First Assist, these are different names of subsidiaries of the organization of the Cigna name. So Cigna is not as well known outside of the United States as it is obviously in the States. So that's been an interesting challenge for us to understand, well, does the Cigna name even resonate? We even introduced a tagline last year as part of our new branding strategy called Go You. It's part of our brand campaign, and really all about you, right, and your health and wellness and your unique needs. But what we found was, as we launched that internationally, it didn't resonate outside of the United States. So we've really spent a lot of time looking at what is our revised brand strategy and how has that continued to evolve, and will that continue to evolve. So it's definitely been a journey, and I would suffice it to say it has been maybe a bit of a challenge in terms of, again, not being well known in some of these particular markets, and obviously through acquisition, we're still leveraging the names of some of those organizations. So we have our work cut out for us in terms of, what that looks like over the course of the next 5 to 10 years in a more aggressive, branding strategy as well. So we've had to adapt. So perhaps how we brand ourselves with some of our partners in countries like the UK or in Turkey, where they leverage social media quite aggressively, I have found out recently. We have some opportunities here, and I think it's going to be, interesting, but also very educational as we work with these country leaders to understand their needs and how we could definitely leverage, an organization like Glassdoor, who is continuing to build out their partnerships globally as well to assist. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, and I talked a little bit about this. This is just an overview of our strategy: go deep, go global, go individual. Again, focused on, going deep means understanding the different geographies. Going global is understanding our global segments that I've spoken about, and then obviously individual. So how are we continuing to focus on you as an individual and your needs and more personalized solutions? Next slide. Okay, and if you can skip forward for just a moment, Katie. I want to talk a little bit more now about, understanding our audience, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the successes and partnerships that we've had. But in terms of understanding our audience, it was really interesting. My team was formed about 2 years ago, I guess, at this point in time. Many of us came from, managing and recruiting teams and managing functional areas from a recruitment perspective. But we were also involved in many different projects. And it's one of the things that we started to look at was, well, what is our social media presence, right? So we talk a lot about people and technology, but what exactly are we doing? It was done over the years. We've developed many partnerships, but it was never really aligned 100% to what the greater organization was doing. So we were kind of out on the periphery, HR, talent. We were doing our own thing, developing our own strategies. There was not a lot of alignment from a brand perspective. So we've really worked for almost 2 years to try to merge that, to build that foundation. And so, as I mentioned, and we've been able to leverage technology, and including gamification and social media and web-based information and tools to make the experience not just more fun, but more interesting and easier. So we've also introduced a host of mobile apps and putting the power basically in the hands of the candidate and the consumer to really kind of manage their own experience, which has been something that's very new for us. So I think when we first started, it was really understanding it's not just who our audience is, but who's the audience and what are they doing in the social media space, and then what is also motivating that level of behavior. And then also, who are the partners that could help us further our mission? We've been watching Glassdoor for a while before we developed our partnership, which has been very successful in a short amount of time. Understanding what are the conversations that are actually taking place out there, and how can we, again, become a part of that? And are they referencing us? And if so, what are they saying about us? So if you'll move to the next slide, Katie. I think a couple things that we started to look at as we were developing our strategy that proved to be quite helpful. Katie, next slide. There we go, is to understand what were the objectives that we were trying to achieve. And as I mentioned, we leverage a scorecard, and the scorecard doesn't just reference our social media or our vendor partnerships. It measures everything from the candidate experience, net promoter score, the hiring manager experience, new hire experience, retention rates, prior year performance, cross-functional movement, all of our diversity metrics. It's very, very robust. But we want to tell the story. So how are we moving the needle? Are we moving the needle? And where are the areas that we need to continue to focus our efforts? So it's really having those clear objectives in mind. And then it's also, putting some measures on paper. So we wanted to reduce costs in terms of how we were leveraging retained and contingent firms. We were spending a lot of money. And for years and years, there wasn't a whole lot of rigor necessarily around that process, not as much as there is today from an expense drill perspective. But we wanted to be able to say, hey, we've introduced these new tools and resources. We've expanded our brand. We provided our recruiters with more access to information and data, and we've trained them so that they feel very comfortable, sourcing and networking and leveraging some of these resources and kind of using their own networks. And we've been able to do that. We've also seen a huge increase in employee referrals because of it. And we've also seen a huge increase in terms of visits to our career site and the number of more qualified candidates that we're seeing. So again, really trying to understand what did we hope to gain from this, and have we realized success in these areas? And again, I would say we're not there by any stretch of the imagination. This is going to be ongoing, but I think we have a really good idea of certainly where we were 2 years ago and what we're hoping to achieve, not just here domestically, but also globally. So it really helped us share those objectives even with our global partners, because they're looking for more rigor, right? They use outside of the United States because they don't have the structure necessarily or the technology. They use firms quite often. They don't have the tools to build out great candidate pools or network, and so we're going to be introducing, a whole suite of tools to them, and again, really helping us to think not just U.S. versus global, but as a global organization, what do those talent pools look like? Where should we be focusing our efforts? Where are the specific gaps? And are we building the talent that we need for the future? Next slide, Katie. The other thing is, just thinking about setting clear objectives and measuring and defining is, well, where do you start with a social media policy? This is just a snippet of information in terms of what our policy looks like. This has been introduced to the organization, and we constantly refer back to it. So again, just making sure employees understand, what they should be responding to and how they should be representing the organization. And we do watch this very, very closely. One of the things that we'll be hoping to do this year, along with global integration and a host of other things that are going on, but we are hoping to roll out some additional training on social networking and social media capabilities to our recruiting team. We have about 61 recruiters in the United States. It's a very lean team, and we have a host of talent consultants that sit in our global markets as well. So again, just making sure we're constantly arming them and that they feel comfortable, and also that they're leveraging relationships that we have with our own internal resources. But this has been a really good starting point for us as an organization. And as you can see here, we did reference the SHRM survey information. So just a few snippets from that, but basically what we've learned based on the SHRM survey, which we've leveraged in some of our strategy documents, is that 55% of those surveyed employers plan to increase their social media efforts in the next year, and that another 40% of organizations have a formal social media policy, as we do. And then about 56% of social media policies include a statement regarding the organization's right to monitor social media usage. So within my team, we actually monitor what we're posting on any of our social media sites. So I'll use Glassdoor as an example. Anytime we respond to a review, that's actually managed by my team. So we hold that close to the vest in terms of who we allow to respond, making sure those folks are trained, that they have partnerships, with our legal team, with our digital marketing team, employee relations, should we need to engage them, or escalate an issue. And many times, we come across issues that do need to be escalated, and perhaps we just need some additional guidance, or we need to refer them, or it might be a customer issue, right? Perhaps they had an issue with the status of a claim. It happens, but we want to make sure that we're prompt in our response and we're engaging the subject matter experts at all times. So we do ensure that we watch that very closely, and there's a core group that does manage that work. Okay. Thank you. So this is a little bit of an overview of Cigna's brand online. So when we started thinking about this, 2 years ago, we kind of put it on paper, and it's evolved over the years, and as we continue to develop new relationships. But we wanted to make it a strategic initiative, and we wanted it to be impactful over a period of time. So we focused on a couple of different areas. One is, how do we find those candidates that were just hard to find, right? For us, skill sets are changing in the clinical space. Again, I mentioned earlier, informatics, actuarial, IT, tough, even in HR, looking for HR partners that are extremely strategic. We are not a tactical HR organization. We have an employee and manager self-service environment here. We expect our managers to be very engaged. Our HR partners are extremely strategic. They have a seat at the table. They're driving those conversations. They're experts in the businesses that they support. So for us, it's really important that we had a way to identify those candidates, and especially in markets and in niche areas or functional areas where competition's just it's just really, really tough. And then how do we outreach to those candidates that are considered passive as well? And then secondly, reaching out to what we like to refer to as a higher quality of candidate. So individuals who frequently use social networks, a lot of them are seen as maybe the early adopters of innovation, and they are very technically savvy. So we like that, right? We're always looking for folks that are kind of out-of-the-box thinkers. We look for learning agility. That's something that we assess to when we're looking at key talent and bringing key talent to the organization. So how learning agile are you? It's not a competency, but again, basically I can put you in any situation and you're going to figure it out. You're going to take the changes and apply them to what you're doing. We want candidates who think like that because we're constantly trying to think of new ways, right, to innovate new products and services that we can bring to our customers. And then it helps us, and it really, social networks, social recruiting allows us to connect with these individuals more quickly. And then, as I mentioned already, increased return on investment. So my team owns the budget for talent acquisition, so we're constantly looking at, again, what's the return on investment? We've invested here. Are we using the resources? It's not necessarily always about the numbers of hires that you're getting. So I hear that a lot. It really kind of depends on how you set up your metrics. But a site like Glassdoor may not necessarily be that destination site, right? So you may have a candidate who's referred to Cigna who decides to visit Glassdoor, which we want them to learn about the organization, to look at the reviews, to look at David Cordani's rating, to understand where the company is going, and then perhaps they may end up applying a different way, right? Maybe they'll go out to the Cigna.com page and apply that way as an example. So you're not necessarily always going to equate your partnerships with a hire. And that's something that we've been very careful about. Although we track the source of hire fairly aggressively, we also know that, again, there's some nuances there that we have to consider as we think about how they're finding out about the opportunity and how they're actually applying. The other thing that's kind of hurt us over the years is that Cigna.com, our career site today, is not mobile enabled, which has been a bit of a problem, whereas a lot of our vendor partners are. So you can visit, Glassdoor on a mobile device. You can look at all of our job postings out there. But once you hit the Cigna site to apply PeopleSoft, it's like hitting a brick wall on a mobile device. That's going to change in July when we introduce Cigna's new global career site and in Taleo in the 4 first countries, Indonesia, India, Singapore, and Hong Kong. And then in the United States, Taleo will be implemented in October. So we'll be moved to a fully mobile optimized site, which is very exciting. And I think that's going to really help us from a strategy perspective as well. So, and then lastly, it's being that premier employer. Some organizations call it the employer of choice, but it's understanding how we have established that online presence and sending that positive message out to candidates to connect, and understanding also how to communicate with them. So as we think about and have thought about the strategy in terms of our global presence and outreach and these partnerships, that's something that we think a lot about. So always asking ourselves the question and then soliciting the feedback. And then again, some of the metrics that we've leveraged include the top sources of hire. What are those sources yielding? We're actually going to be doing a bit of a deeper dive in terms of the source for high performers. So looking at source by tenure, source by previous year performance rating. That's on the horizon for us. And we do measure time to fill, but that's not a metric we hold our talent consultants accountable for. We do it to benchmark ourselves, but we really are very focused on quality and less on trying to hit a time to fill metric. So we actually moved away from that about 3 years ago. Next slide, please. And then, we recognize the potential for social networking and using many tools, right? So I think we think about like Twitter being an example. Our social recruiting strategy needs to be a part of our overall goals and objectives, right, in order to actually deliver that true return on the investment. So we actually leverage Twitter. As you can see here, this is a snippet of information in terms of the various resources and jobs that we have available. And I think we'll see a spike in how we leverage Twitter this year. We actually will be initiating a little bit more of an aggressive strategy than we have in the past, although it's proven to be very, very popular. One of the things that we have not done, and I would always point this out for consideration, I know a lot of companies do it, is we don't have a dedicated social media team. You might be asking yourself that question. My gosh, how are you getting all this done? You must have a dedicated team of 10 people, and we really don't. It's really my team, and there are only 3 of us, one of which has actually been moved over to the global implementation project. So it's very lean, but we do have very strong relationships with our partners. So we do interact almost on a daily basis, and we're constantly reviewing the information and responding proactively. So we don't respond necessarily every single day, but we do try to be as proactive as possible in responding. We also leverage things like Hootsuite and Buddy Media to allow us to post materials and events and updates proactively, so that we're not having to post necessarily every day. So that there are things that we leverage from an efficiency perspective, that tend to be quite helpful. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about our partnership. So as I mentioned earlier, Cigna has a very robust partnership with Glassdoor. And we've leveraged Glassdoor for many months, and we've seen a nice increase. We actually had a 65% increase in traffic over last year with Glassdoor as of March. In the last 30 days, we've had over 40,000 page views. We've entered new content. We have new followers, about 136 new followers. Our CEO ratings about 82%, which against our competitors is best in class. We're also using social media badges and other icons like LinkedIn and Twitter. So again, and what we're doing, we talked a lot to our recruiters about leveraging the links and these badges and all the correspondence. It doesn't matter. We do a lot of presentations. We're in the marketplace or on site at the universities. How are we continuing to brand ourselves on a consistent basis? We've also had we're also number one in terms of traffic against our primary competitors, and we've seen a 20% increase in reviews and ratings since partnering with Glassdoor. Right now, we are one of the first companies that are leveraging the ability on Glassdoor actually to go out and respond to reviews. And again, it's very beneficial. It goes back to what we talked about earlier in terms of being transparent. So looking at the information and not just responding to the reviews that are really positive, but the ones that are perhaps not as positive, but also taking the time to thank those that actually did provide some kind of feedback, negative or positive, has been very, very critical. Next slide, please. There we go. Cigna was one of the early adopters or one of the earlier organizations to embrace Facebook as a recruiting platform. So we have been leveraging the social network since 2012. We actually partner very closely with Work for Less, and we make our job opportunities accessible to any visitor of the Cigna Careers Facebook page. So we use many innovative solutions, recruiting ads, and what we call social job sharing, that have been very, very beneficial in terms of being able to set up, as you can see here, a social job sharing functionality that allows us to share by setting it up one time, opportunities or key events and such through all of our social networking channels. So it's just been hugely successful for us, and we have the majority of our recruiters using this, and also we are able to allow others to share in their networks as well. So again, this has been a great partnership for us, and we've really leveraged more targeted ads in many of our key markets where we do a lot of more targeted hiring, those markets being Philadelphia, Bloomfield, Phoenix, Hartford, Connecticut, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where we actually have very big pharmacy operations as well. So again, being able to target specific candidates based on profile data while promoting our content is something that we are going to continue to do. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they're also mobile, so it allows us to reach candidates and allows them to get to the information rather swiftly. We also have an early dedicated early career hires page as well that allows us to focus on early career hires. So a lot of our campus hiring across the globe, we use similar functionality, and we're working on a more robust strategy as we move into the summer and the fall recruiting season, which is very, very important for us. So successes. we've had over 4,700 candidates visit Cigna's job list on Facebook career page since September of 2013 as a result of seeing Facebook ads. These candidates have read more than 3,700 job descriptions, and the ads are bringing in about 65% of their career page total traffic. We have had over 7,000 ad clicks as well, and 47% of job increase in job views, and 36% of applications came through those actual targeted ads that we're leveraging. So again, it's all helping in terms of how are we reaching out to those networks, how are they getting to that level of information, and making it as easy as possible for them to learn about the opportunity and also the impact, right? So that's one thing that we're very focused on, is not just posting something, but how does this impact the greater strategy of the organization as well. Next slide. And then measuring our performance. So this is just a brief overview of how we, continue to measure our performance. We can look at everything from job views from a mobile device. We can look at how many folks have applied through some kind of a job alert that they received from us. We can measure traffic from social job sharing functionality. We can understand applicant conversion rates and total views. So we actually use this and we share this with our leadership team in talent acquisition and with our recruiters so that they can understand how are we trending and where do we need to continue to improve. So it's been very, very helpful. Next slide. And then this slide just depicts Cigna's presence on LinkedIn. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, you're going to see this look very, very different as Cigna moves to a global framework for our LinkedIn platform. What that means is that today we're a bit US-centric, but we are working on a more global strategy. We also have a careers page that we built out and introduced last year on LinkedIn that has been very successful. And I think that we'll be actually looking to continue to leverage this with our global partners and understanding their global needs. So those are conversations that we're continuing to have, with our global partners today. Thank you. And this slide, again, I thought this was important to notate. We actually just met with LinkedIn not too long ago to talk about that. We're always meeting with them. We meet with them every quarter to understand how are we doing. But these metrics were very interesting to me. Folks that are following the organization, 61% are more willing to be your brand ambassador. We're able to get reports from LinkedIn that tell us how many changed their profile information to notate that they have joined Cigna or left Cigna and where they're going. We can get down to that level of detail. So we know if they're leaving Cigna and they're changing it in their profile, we know exactly where they're going, and we get reports that help us understand. So it's very, very interesting, the analytics. But again, it's not just getting the report, but what are we doing with it and how are we telling the story so that we understand our strategy going forward. Next slide. Thank you. And then our global presence. So since our launch over 8 months ago, what I would say, this is the introduction of Cigna's new career page that we introduced on LinkedIn. We've actually had over 16,000 professionals visit content from leading competitors in the healthcare space. So that would be Aetna, United, and Humana for us. We've had a huge increase in the number of hires. So our return on investment with LinkedIn is actually very, very good. We've added 20,000 plus new company followers. And 29% of those new hires turned out to be current followers. Also, 23% of our new hires in the last 6 months were actually company followers. So that's amazing. And we're, I think the gist of it is that we're constantly influencing hires through our investments, our partnerships. And we can compare our talent brand index versus our peers, right? So those other companies that we deem to be premier employers or what you might refer to as an employer of choice. So in closing, what I would say, and I hope you all have found this very helpful. As I said, it's an absolute journey, but usage, social media continues to skyrocket. More businesses are recognizing the need and the fact that high-quality candidates can be reached faster and at a lower cost using social networks than traditional recruiting methods. And it also gives our recruiters a competitive edge in locating and engaging the best candidates available. So again, it's been my pleasure to have been here today. I hope you found this overview of what we're trying to do somewhat helpful. I think we're going to have some questions toward the very end today, but Kelly, I am actually going to turn it over to you to talk about next steps.
Thank you very much, Dina. And thank you everyone for staying on the line and talking. And now I am just going to take about 5 minutes to just go high level over how Glassdoor helps employers, like many of you on the line, leverage your branding and social initiatives with our platforms. So, Kate, you can jump to the next slide as well. The way that job seekers really behave in this space has changed from years ago. Gone are the days of job seekers really just going to traditional job boards and applying. And the reason is some of these statistics that you're looking at here. Over 50% of buyers or job seekers, have buyer's remorse. They have an inaccurate picture of what it's like to work at an organization because they don't have the insight and information. 95 or almost all of the job seekers that we've studied and pulled in this data are influenced by the reviews from those inside the company on Glassdoor. And 3/4 of the population, they wouldn't take the job with a company with a bad reputation. And really what that means is job seekers are doing their homework now. They're researching information about what it's like to work at organizations on platforms like Glassdoor. Next slide. And again, what we know and what we've seen with a lot of our partners is that a company's employment brand reputation directly impacts its ability to attract and retain top talent. And that's because of some of the stats on the previous slide, because job seekers want to know what the information is about what they're walking into so they can make more educated and informed decisions about applying for those opportunities and staying at a company for a longer period of time. Next slide. So about half of the population of job seekers use Glassdoor today. And we've really become a nice, trusted, and transparent platform for job seekers to find the jobs and companies that they love. And how this helps employers like yours, and Katie, you can just move right next to the next slide, is by utilizing two of our talent solutions, coupling them together to really have a 360 view of what it's like to work at your organization in Glassdoor's kind of one-stop shop for our talent solutions. The first area is our job advertisement, and what that does is that provides a platform for job seekers to find your jobs on Glassdoor throughout all of our areas of the site. The behavior that we see on Glassdoor for job seekers is that they are not only just going to look at the jobs, but then they mosey along right over to the employment profile and take a look at the good and the bad and find out what it's like about the company, the culture, and the role. And the reason why we're having this webinar today and why Dina gave an overview on Cigna is because companies are joining the conversation. They're raising their hand and saying, I want to be able to tell my side of the story. And one of the ways that companies do that is by partnering with Glassdoor and purchasing our employment profile, which allows you as an employer to put information up on there about what it's like to work at your organization and influence candidates in making the decision to work for your company. Next slide. And the results that we see with companies like Cigna and our partners is that because we're not only just providing the jobs, we're providing the companies and the information about what it's like to work at those organizations, we're sending employers 2 times better applicant quality. It's lowering their cost per hire by about 30%. And that's because we've got about 3 times more influence over candidates' job decisions because of our employment profile and our recruitment marketing strategies. And I know we have a lot of questions here today, so I want to just make sure that we've got some time for Katie to close up. If anybody has any additional information or questions that they'd like me to provide for them after this webinar, Katie will also send out my contact information with the recording so that anybody can just contact me directly, and I'd be happy to steer you in the right direction on how you can partner with Glassdoor to handle this, the recruitment marketing and all of your initiatives in employment branding.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina and Kelly. I appreciate it. That was a great webinar. I see we have quite a few questions and we're totally out of time, but I'm going to download all the questions and we will be sure to respond to all of them tomorrow or today. So with that, I'd like to thank our speakers and thank you all for joining. This was a great one. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.